Let's take a look at some agility video clips. And you may ask yourself, what does this have to do with HYLN?
I think it's clear that customer preferences as well as regulatory changes are going to change the way that supply chains and value chains need to be optimized. I think going forward, the supply chains and value chains of the past were optimized to either deliver the lowest cost or a time parameter, but nowhere in that equation was anything in there about sustainability or the environment. So
this is in 2009, and now he's talking about, in this video, sustainability and the environment at the World Economic Forum.
So we're going to be going through a process that starts at the design stage, working collaboratively with supply chain engineers to look at introducing this element of the environment in the way that we design services and products, and to make choices about how we do things going forward. So I do think that companies that are caught flat-footed in this area stand to lose both a substantial market opportunity, but also perhaps even face the wrath of regulators. So it's very critical now to really look at this and do it over again.
So he's saying that companies will have to take a look at sustainability, otherwise for some reason they're going to be left behind.
We think of ourselves as a startup with some resources.
Now he's saying he's a startup company. This sounds familiar from somewhere.
And the reality is we're not the largest company in the world, but we have enough resources to be a large company. And if we can keep our sort of our agile culture at the heart of how we engage these small companies, I think we can learn a lot from those engagements.
As a leader, you have to realize what it is.
So what startups was he talking to at that time? And the first one is Peter Smith, that is from a blockchain company.
Is that you, quite frankly, are sucking at. And I realized that as time went on, we would need to explain what we do. We need to figure out how to present the company. We need to figure out how to do things like marketing. And so you go out and you hire people that are much better at it than yourself. And then the biggest challenge for me over the last 2 years is we've scaled the company, because we have a large company now. It's not a small company anymore. It's figuring out how to.
So he was able to scale the company up to a large company.
Trust those people.
We definitely embrace the rise of the nerds. We've had everywhere from.
Now, for some reason, in this agility video, this was created back in, I think, 2017, Thomas Healy is in this video.
A 19-year-old drop out of college and come join our company to a much more experienced software engineer who's been down this path before. We have a lot of people that graduated from the same school. Some didn't even graduate, they just dropped out and joined us. So it's a lot of young nerds that are working together to solve a big problem.
The ground handling operations in the airport, we had one of those large trucks that are used to pull airplanes, and you have all seen them. They're 2 or 3 rows wide, or rows on a street.
So now Tarek is talking about trucks.
So when the truck to deliver this cart arrived late, our employee had a great idea, and he thought he would drive that truck from the port in Shueikh all the way to the airport at the main airport. Well, guess what happened? It ran out of gas halfway there and blocked the traffic. Anyway, he refueled it, got the truck to the airport, and everything was okay.
Now, a question I have is there a company that creates a product that could possibly extend the range of trucks? And I know it's shelved and some people call it a failure, but let's listen to what he has to say about failing.
But
that doesn't come without having personal ownership. Sometimes failure is necessary. I think this is, before we worked with Faisal in a previous life on Burgan, we had a failure. We tried to approach the government. The government said, here, you can go and you can privatize this bank. But we failed. We couldn't do it. But from that experience, we learned, and it's often those failures that create an opportunity for you to learn and to develop. Another example is we spent a lot of money during the early days of the dot-com boom investing in technology around the supply chain. And our idea was that every company, every individual was going to be able to have their own website with their own fulfillment and their own payment gateway. Well, that was a total financial flop.
So he invested a lot of company into a technology company that dealt with the supply chain, and it failed. But let's listen and see who the target customer is of that failure.
And we ended up having 2 or 3 customers. But because we had made those investments, when the US military was looking for a platform from which to execute their logistics, we had more advanced systems than they did. Why? Because of a failure. So oftentimes, out of a failure, an opportunity comes that's unanticipated.
So the target customer was the United States military because the technology was more advanced.
The room that I'm standing in now is, we like to call it sort of our museum of failures, right?
Now we have a tech company with a museum of failures, and he's referring to not the ERX, but he's actually talking about the previous attempts of getting the Carno up and running.
Not all of them are failures. This, engine behind me was one of our very first prototypes, as an example, at about 25 kilowatt power output, but it proved that what we could do. And then once you have that proof point.
With every constraint and with every difficult sort of position that you've put in, I think the opportunities become more and more apparent. So we talk about sustainability, for example. Sustainability.
Here we go again. He's talking about sustainability, which came from the first video from the World Economic Forum in 2009.
Governments need to think about sustainability to make their economies more robust, but everybody needs to be thinking about sustainability as we move towards this new paradigm where, even a country that's as energy rich as the kingdom, if you start looking at the need for electricity with new data centers, new projects coming online, you realize that even in the kingdom we have a shortage of electricity. So how are we going to produce the next gigawatt of electricity?
Now you notice he didn't say a megawatt of electricity. He didn't say 200 kilowatts of electricity. He said 1 gigawatt, and that is the equivalent of 500 data center Carno generators, because one of those can theoretically produce up to 2 megawatts.
We should be thinking about sustainability to make that happen, and it's fantastic that we've seen already over $180 billion of investment by the kingdom alone in sustainable fuels and green fuels for the future. Now
is where is Tarek investing his money into a sustainable technology company?
So when you see that, we've invested in a few companies that, one I'm particularly excited about is a company called HYLN. They make a generator that comes from a 3D printer. The fantastic thing about this generator is that it can use 20 different types of fuel. It can use hydrocarbons, which is very much needed in today's environment because there's no solution for sustainability that doesn't involve the oil and gas industry. I know it's not a popular thing to say, but it also uses all of the green fuels at the same time. So one generator using 20 different types of fuels, and to make it even more interesting, it's a silent generator. So if you think about If you think about shipping, one of the biggest environmental problems that we face today is that large container ships make noise, and that noise disrupts the marine environment. So the idea that you can actually have power being produced in a printer that's basically printed in your backyard, that is quiet, preserves the environment, and uses green fuels at the same time, it almost sounds like a little bit of a joke, but that's the sort of opportunity that comes when you start thinking about problems and sustainability.
So he's putting money into HYLN, and one thing he mentions at the end is the noise that conventional generators make, and large container ships make a lot of noise, which is bad for the marine environment. Let's hear what Thomas has to say about noise. And when you listen to the next video clip, is marine life brought up into the video clip in this next one?
Is very low noise, low vibration. That's obviously pretty important for the military as well.
It's not talking about shipping containers or container ships. He's now, in this video clip, the low noise is for the United States military.
Yeah, especially when you're talking about the water as well and marine life and things like that, obviously really important.
Now it sounds like that marine life thing was just kind of thrown in there, and I wonder why.
The ability to dream and to set ridiculous goals is something that's really important. And it's not important if you actually achieve those goals or not, but that you can actually motivate and sort of go in the direction of achieving a goal that you consider almost ridiculous to achieve. And
let's go back to this other video clip and listen to something that kind of sounds ridiculous.
With every constraint and with every, so how are we going to produce the next gigawatt of electricity?
The Carnot generator only produces 200 kilowatts, and I know the next iteration is 2 megawatts, but he was talking about with these data centers how we're going to come up with the next.
So how are we going to produce the next gigawatt of electricity?
That's a lot of power. So what happens if you start thinking at that scale?
The ability to innovate and sort of go in the direction of achieving a goal that you can, goals or not, but that you can actually motivate and sort of go in the direction of achieving a goal that you consider almost ridiculous to achieve. And we had a plan. It was called 8x8, and part of the 8x8 was that we were going to achieve $8 billion in revenues by 2008, and we came fairly close. I think we got close, $7 or $7.5 billion at the time. But from a company that was started with $30 million of revenue and 200 or 300 employees.
So they started off with 30 million in revenue and scaled up to 7 billion, not million, but $1 billion in revenue by having some very far out there goal. That's amazing.
To basically have that drive, I think was a large part due to having a vision like that made really challenged everybody to organize.
Now this one doesn't make any logical sense, but I'm just going to play it anyway.
You know, what is the heritage that comes from that? Well, there's a certain toughness that came from growing up in those days, and I think that's something that stayed with me my years. It's also somewhat nice spending your days fishing and catching birds, and so you learned also how to be creative. And do you know how you actually catch birds? Well, you first have to catch a cockroach. And how do you catch a cockroach?
You have to learn to take a bottle and put a date in the bottle and lower it into the sewer. That's how we spent our times growing up as kids. And so that's, I think, a pretty creative solution way to catching birds. Anyway.
We're going to go.
So if you're thinking about HYLN, and HYLN's going to catch a bird, and they're sitting there putting dates in plastic bottles, and you don't know how things are going to connect at the end. I'm like listening to them and thinking, like, what in the heck are you guys doing? Why did you ditch the ERX? No, wait, it's shelved. But
Around to the
as
other
they
side,
go
and
around
Josh is going to
here,
give us an overview on just what's on the inside that makes.
in the background, there's a truck, and I think that's the truck that had the Carno generator in it, and it's sitting right in front of a wind turbine from GE Veranova. That's before they split up. So on one side of this video clip, you have the Carno in a truck in a mobile application. And right next to him, there's a Carno in a generator in a stationary application. And what bird, going back to the creative analogy, what bird are they trying to catch? 3D printers and sustainability are in here, and I know GE's that core component. But something's going to connect, and I don't know how exactly, but there is more going on than meets the eye. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching.